welcome in Campo and Joe, ready to rock and roll on a Tuesday. This is the second Tuesday that Campo and Joe fires up a podcast without a Jaguars head coach. But you got Joe C. from XL Primetime, our head coach, Dave Campo, as we are ready to crank it out. And listen, all Duval and beyond, everybody's wondering what's going on with the coaching search. So we're going to hit that first and foremost, and then talk a little bit about the way the NFL postseason has looked through the first weekend. And I think there's just so much to dig into, Coach, about the possibilities of where this team could go in terms of hiring a head coach. And we'll run through the list of candidates. But what do you think about a week into this bad boy, and we don't have a feel for who they like, who they're gravitating towards, or anything?
Well, of course, that's the same as it's been right along because, really what happens is, some guys are involved in the playoffs and can't do anything but virtual, and
right.
Some guys are out, and they've got about 10 candidates, I believe, and all of those guys that they want to interview, not all of them are head coach oriented. Some of it's information gathering, and so you don't know until you kind of get. Usually, it's that second interview where things start to get serious about where they're headed.
All right, so give us an idea. Former Dallas Cowboy head coach, longtime assistant. Give us an idea of what the coaching, how the process works.
Well, first of all, they're going to get an idea. First of all, they've had information on each of these guys from one source or another, and you're trying to get the sources that really know him, whoever it is, on an individual basis. And that means, just like you would do with a recruit, or a free agent guy, you want to talk to not only them, but some of the guys that surround him. For example, the equipment managers, the trainers, some of the things that kind of give you an idea as how the guy is as a person, along with his abilities that he's shown on the football field, or else he wouldn't be one of those guys if he hadn't been doing some things there. So in an interview process, it really comes down to the questions that are most important, as far as I'm concerned, is leadership qualities.
Okay.
What does he show from a vision standpoint of what he wants the football team to look like and how he approaches getting there? And the other thing that's important, and I think some of this stuff gets put out there in a second interview, sometimes on a first interview, maybe virtual, because some of these guys have been able to do that.
Right.
You get an idea about a guy, but until you look him in the eye in a regular setting, I don't know that you get the real person. But they're going to want to know, who can you bring in from a staff standpoint, and that's the toughest thing in the NFL, because there are some guys you say you can get, but you can't get them when it's all said and done. But you try to bring in guys that fit that vision, and I think that's part of the interview process for sure.
It is funny because I want you to expand just a little bit on, you interview them, and they basically want to come in and maybe, I don't know, use this as a forum for them to get better at the interview process, but having really no interest in the job. Or like you said, they're going to try and go for a guy that they have no shot of getting, but they're still going to try and do the interview.
Yeah.
Is that wasted time, wasted energy, or I don't think you should ever be unrealistic about who you can get. I think you can convince someone that this is a plump coaching job.
Right. And really, to be honest with you, I don't think any of it's a waste of time, other than the fact if you've got 2 or 3 candidates that are being courted by other people going in. Some people, and I don't know, it doesn't sound like Shad does this, but for example, the Jets, I know for sure, had a search group that gives you a ton of information. And you sometimes can get that information, say, okay, Joe Coward's the guy I want.
Right.
But there's 3 other teams that have got that same information. So if you drag it out, there's a chance you can lose the candidate that you really want. So in all honesty, when you bring in guys for interviews, there's a lot of information gathering. For example, let's say Saleh, the head coach of the Jets, he may not be somebody you put in the top 2 or 3 candidates, but the way this defense is played this year, you can definitely get some information from him about what this defense should look like when the new guy comes in.
All right, so I'm glad you went there, because this is another kind of angle of this that I was thinking of. Robert Saleh was an he was a linebackers coach here, a respected coach on that side of the ball, goes out to San Francisco, rises to the defensive coordinator level, then gets hired in New York. And we all know it kind of unraveled, and you can blame Rodgers more than maybe you can blame Robert Saleh.
And the owner.
It unraveled in such a big way. So you are right. And you may not right now look at Robert Saleh as, oh hell yeah, he should be a head coaching candidate again after getting fired the way he did. You have been a head coach, fired by an owner, and then brought back. Now, go through that timeline for us and give us an idea, because Saleh obviously has been away from here for a lot longer than what we're describing.
Yeah,
with you.
I think there is something to the fact that your familiarity with the way the organization works. And also, in my case, I think Jerry, and he's said it publicly, that the biggest mistake they made with me was not getting a quarterback.
Yeah.
And, obviously he was very involved in personnel. So I think he realized that, and the loyalty factor is there with him. Now, I don't know if there's any loyalty with Saleh, because he wasn't here with he was here with Shad,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he was in
so
within the last 7 years.
Yeah. Okay. So there might be some loyalty involved there with knowing how Shad works and those kind of things. And the other thing with Jerry in the decision with me was based, which is similar to here, was they had just gotten the new stadium ready to go. And he needed, because of we didn't win as many as we needed to, he needed somebody that could juice up the fan base a little bit so that stadium could be going, because there was a lot of city money involved.
Sure.
In it. So, in this case, I think, he brought in Parcells, who was a Super Bowl winner and a Hall of Fame candidate to replace me.
Right.
I don't know if there's a guy out there right now that is in the same breath as that, maybe other than McCarthy. McCarthy from the Cowboys could jump into this conversation.
Right.
Because that would certainly, when you look at 12-5, 12-5, 12-5, that could certainly juice up the fans a little bit. And he's an experienced guy who has dealt with quarterbacks. So it really comes down to a guy like Saleh, has got some cred here.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it.
It's been a while since he's been here. That's correct. And it's hard to believe that he was in the position he started 4 seasons as the head coach of the Jets, and then he got fired quickly into this season. But anyway, he's a guy that is, I would think, as you said, respected on the defensive side of the football. Now, you mentioned Mike McCarthy, and you think of a couple of old heads, we'll call them. That's no offense to you, Coach. I'm an old head, too.
Yeah.
But
you're still a rookie, though.
When you think of Mike McCarthy, accomplished Super Bowl winner, a lot like Doug Peterson, they walk into their next job with a Super Bowl resume, but they're not able to duplicate the success. We all know Doug dispatched after 2 9-8 seasons in a really stinky year this year, but McCarthy did have 3 12-5s before this year came undone with Dak getting hurt. Mike McCarthy, Pete Carroll, another Super Bowl winning coach. Would you be, and the chatter's out there, hey, would you try and make a deal and trade for Mike Tomlin? Let's just use him for this discussion. He's also a one-time Super Bowl winning head coach. Any appeal, intrigue? How would you rank those 3?
Well, I would have to say that McCarthy's probably the head of the class.
Yeah.
Unless you can make, because the trade from Tomlin's going to cost you
very much
a lot.
Yeah.
And he's kind of been so here for a while. It's not like he's killing the league. Now, the great thing about it is he's obviously good, because he's kept that thing going for a long time, 17 years, I think, or something like that, without a losing season.
It might even be 21. It's nuts what they've been able to do.
Yeah, and some of that is the organization and the people surrounding him, too.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. I think an older guy right now would have a little harder time coming in with a GM being here and not knowing exactly what that role is going to entail. And that's part of the interview process now. Don't forget that the guys coming in here are interviewing
The team as
Jacksonville.
Well. Yeah, yeah.
It's not just Jacksonville interviewing them. It's a combination.
Yeah.
But I think McCarthy, to me, has enough of an edge on him that he could command some respect in this organization, and he's proven that he can win. So I would put him ahead. I love Pete Carroll. Don't get me wrong. And I think that he's an organization guy and could be a good one. So
it's funny. He has personality and a plan.
Correct. I like him. I mean,
Right.
I think he's a guy that could really be a good coach. I think it really comes down to the organization, whether they want a young guy on the come or whether they want a guy that's, got some experience.
Okay,
and we don't know what direction they're going in.
The further we get away from Doug Peterson not being the head coach here, the more you hear, the more these little things leak out that he didn't necessarily have control. He didn't necessarily have that firm hand on the team, firm plan going forward. A Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah.
Now, Pete Carroll is also a Mr. Nice Guy, players coach, rah-rah. He'll jump and chest bump you and all that kind of stuff. He was the oldest head coach in the league when he got let go.
Right.
And he would be coming back even older now. But would he be an organized players coach more than a Doug Peterson?
Well, first of all, I think Doug, with his background with the quarterbacks back in the day, his approach looks to me like, hey, these guys are professionals.
Mm-hmm.
They need to fix this themselves.
Yeah. That's how he attacked it.
Yeah, they need to understand that they're professional. This is their job. And in this day and age, I've talked to a couple of assistant coaches in the league right now, and they didn't tell me anything I didn't know already. This is a changed environment.
You know what's so funny, Coach? You can't put demands on them like you would in the back in the day. You can't. I'm just going to use a couple. You can't dog cuss them.
Right.
You can't challenge them, and you can't say you're going to lose playing time if you don't do X.
Right.
And then the opposite is true is still true that if you are like Doug Peterson was, hey, this is your job. This is how to do it. I'm going to show you how to do it, but I'm not going to demand that you do it. Right. That doesn't work either.
Yeah, that's the issue. And I think when you look at those three guys you're talking about, obviously Tomlin has been there for a long time. And, he may be getting a little tired of the difference in the way you're handling players. And maybe that's why they've kind of evened out. Even though we got them to the playoffs, they were an even Steven team.
Yeah.
And and then here's the other thing that you're looking at. Schott has had to make coaching decisions here a number of times.
Yeah, this will be his sixth head coach that will be hired.
How about some longevity?
Yeah.
So does that mean that you go for a young guy that you can look at like, hey, if this is the guy and he does really well, I'm going to have him for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, which the real good head coaches have done.
Yeah.
I was looking through the head coach thing actually what I did the other day, I was just curious because I looked at all the assistants of the year. Mm-hmm. Assistant coaches of the year since 1993. And there's only 2 coaches in that group that did not become head coach.
Okay.
And I was one of them.
Okay.
That became a head coach.
But you already were a head coach.
No. I'm talking about a defensive assistant of the year.
Right.
When I was a coordinator back I was in, I think it was, I don't know, it was 1995 when we won the Super Bowl. Okay. My point is that of all those guys, when you look at them, the majority of the guys that were really successful were 6, 7, 8, 9, 2 different teams, 3 different teams. There were very few of us that were 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. The majority of them they hit on them, is my point.
Okay. Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Right.
I don't think I was unsuccessful because I couldn't be a head coach. I think there were reasons there.
Yeah.
But when you look at that, he's been 2 years, 3 years, 1 year. Maybe they're looking for a guy that's longevity. And maybe our guy McCarthy is still a fairly young guy.
Mhm.
Maybe he is longevity.
Yeah. I really wish I knew. It's hard to believe that Mike McCarthy was in Dallas for 5 years. That's how quickly time flies.
Yeah.
But just to give everybody, and all of Duval, you guys are certainly Jaguar fans, so you know this, but just to remind those who may not, when Shad Khan bought the team in late 11, he took over in 12. He had a one-season run with Mike Mularkey, a 2-win total. Then he hired Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley, over a 4-year period from 13 to 16, basically became the second losingest coach in the Super Bowl era.
Right.
That is how bad the record was. And they stayed with him into that 4th year.
Yeah.
Then they fired him before the end of the year. That story, the way they fired him on the tarmac in Houston, is still terrible.
Yeah. Right.
And so then they interim Doug Marrone. Then they keep Doug Marrone. And then Marrone goes from interim in 16, coach 17, 18, 19, 20, and they bounce him.
Right.
And then they get Herb for 1 year,
Right.
doesn't even make the year. And then Doug Peterson comes in, and the healer, I'm calling him soft server healer. I can't quite figure it out.
Yeah.
And they bring him in 21, what am I? 22 to 24, and he's done.
Right.
And now this will be head coach number 6. And so Shad has got to get this right. And those are two nice guys, Coach.
Yep.
Among those, and you don't necessarily need to hire a nice guy. You need a taskmaster.
Yeah, and I think that maybe hurts a guy like Pete Carroll because
might.
Pete Carroll's 70.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever. So if you're looking at longevity, that's probably not it.
Right.
And again, I mean, I think I could still do it at 77.
Yeah.
But not everybody is like that. He may be one of those guys that you could say, okay, 5 years, maybe we can get 5 years. But if you're that, I think is as big a determining factor as to whether they bring in a guy with experience like a Saleh that's young,
right,
or a new guy, one of these offensive guys, Liam Cohen or Brady or Ben Johnson.
Okay, so hit those guys right now, because I'm just looking at the list. And Liam Cohen, I thought, did marvelous things in Tampa with Baker Mayfield. But Baker has almost had he's a renaissance man. He's had a rebirth of his career. But that also spanned Dave Canales last year and Liam Cohen this year. So I'm going to give Baker, Mike Evans, and all those other guys a lot of credit.
Yep.
I'm not necessarily going to just lean in on Liam and say he's the only guy. Todd Monken has done it at several different stops.
Right.
He is in his late 50s.
Right.
So basically you got guys that are either mid to late 30s and Ben Johnson, in their 40s and then in their 50s.
Right.
Ben Johnson, is he the most attractive hire to you, or are you still a little lukewarm on that?
Well, the only thing I'd be lukewarm on is the fact that first of all, I don't trust offensive coaches. You know that.
And so you might like
I would lead to Aaron Glenn.
Yeah, there you go.
I'd lean that way, but
okay. So spend just a hot second on Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson both learning under Dan Campbell.
right.
So would you say they are both the same? I want the guy bringing the offense.
Yeah.
But I do like what Aaron Glenn has done.
First of all, I don't know Ben Johnson like I know Aaron Glenn.
Right.
That to me, and again, I'm not pushing for Aaron Glenn.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what they're looking for. The only thing I'm saying is
They don't know what they're looking for.
well, maybe not. At least over the course of the last 13 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. But all I can say is that I'm hearing that there are some questions about leadership qualities of Ben Johnson. Well, I don't know that. I'm just hearing guys make that statement that he doesn't interview that well.
Right.
Well, Eric Bieniemy, I heard the same thing about him, and he hasn't gotten a head coaching job.
Right.
But sometimes guys can interview, but they really are not really saying anything. They're just selling.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things involved. The thing that I like about Aaron Glenn, for an example, because I know him better, I know Monken better
Yeah.
because I was with him.
Right.
That's all I know about him. There's an edge to them. They're no nonsense. They're tell it like it is. They're extremely competitive.
Check.
And all of those things are positive.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know Ben Johnson. I know that his offenses are pretty darn good.
Right.
And I think he utilizes all his guys, So I guess there's pluses either way. Liam Cohen, not much experience. He was in college a year ago.
Well, he's over a 5-year period. We just mentioned Mike McCarthy's been in Dallas for half a decade. Over a 5-year period, Liam Cohen was L.A., Kentucky, Tampa.
Correct.
So
that's
that's
maybe
a hopper and a jumper.
maybe
is
a
what
little
it
bit
is.
of a negative.
Yeah.
Because the college experience is different than the pro experience. Any way you look at
Well,
it.
he didn't make Devin Leary better last year as a
Right.
Kentucky Wildcat, and he walked into a better situation the way
got
Baker
a number
played
one
this
draft pick that's on the move.
Yeah.
Headed back up.
Yeah.
So to me, Monken and
I like Monken.
Yeah, I like Monken. They're both the same kind of guys. Again, maybe with the quarterback situation that we have, maybe Monken's the better candidate than Aaron Glenn because you don't know who Aaron Glenn's going to bring in here.
Right.
So there are so many things. It's going to be hard to pinpoint to me if we see, unless they have a pure candidate, unless we see a second interview starting to take place.
Right.
When you can really zero in on guys on what they're looking for, it's kind of hard to make a decision on who's the best.
And the other thing is we can make assumptions here on Campo and Joe. It's our job to at least kind of forecast what we think will happen. But you know what assumptions are. It can make an ass out of you and me.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's done that in the past.
And so I don't want to make this assumption, but the theory that we just threw out there about Robert Saleh is that while he may not have succeeded overall as a head coach, he's a dang good defensive coordinator. Don't assume that someone's going to walk in here and get hired and then lob a phone call to Rob and say, Rob, you want to come in and coach the defense?
Right.
That could happen in any of the other NFL job openings.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
he could be on the radar for the Dallas Cowboy defensive coordinator today.
Yeah.
That all of those things come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing, look in the league how many second chances guys there are.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Well, just based on how it goes, some are definitely going to get a second chance.
Yeah.
Other ones not so successful.
right.
They're going to get a stamp on them that it didn't work.
Yeah. I mean, look at Dan Quinn. I mean, what he's done in Washington.
Yeah.
Todd Bowles, he's a different coach today than he was with the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that second time around, I guarantee you I'd have been a better head coach if
Yeah.
I didn't try to get a second job.
Right.
I said,
But
that's it. But if you try to get a second job,
Yeah.
you learn in the first job. This is not an exact science here.
Well, you can go old school. Bill Belichick, the Patriots was his second job.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll with Seattle was his second job. He was already a very successful head coach in college as well.
Right.
All right, so we've got those guys. Kellen Moore, lukewarm on him. Cohen, lukewarm.
I think Kellen Moore's got a real shot at the Cowboys.
Yeah, because Jerry's enamored with him, liked him
familiarity,
before. Yes,
and all those things.
And then what about Deion, real quick?
Well, Deion to me is a little bit like Aaron Glenn with more personality and marketing ability.
Sure.
Sometimes you don't know if the marketing ability outweighs the ability.
Right.
That's the only concern I would have. I get a little leery with ex-players unless I know how they operate.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's done more in a short amount of time than I ever would have imagined.
Absolutely. And the other thing I like about him is that the guy's smart and he knows how to deal with players. I'll guarantee you that. So he could come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I just don't see it right now.
Right.
But at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me with Jerry. Hey, I even heard Jason Witten's name thrown in over there.
Witten's been talked about once or twice whenever going back to when they originally hired Mike McCarthy.
And he's only coached high school football. But, again, people, how they are, if you're successful here, you can also be successful there with a lot of people.
Yeah, and Deion's proven that, and Dan Campbell has proven that on the NFL level, that's for sure. All right, real quick, before we get out of here, I want to see Trevor on the move, so I think that's going to be a big key. If you take a look at the way these offenses, they're multiple, the skill set that these quarterbacks have in today's world, Trevor has that skill set. He just needs to employ it more. Josh Allen is phenomenal. We know how great he is. Lamar's El Boogie. Enough said. And then take a look at what Jaden Daniels has done as soon as he walked onto an NFL football field.
Yep.
Throw C.J. Stroud in this last go-around when he said, you know what? I need to make plays with my feet.
Throw Knicks into it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what when with all the speed that they've got and the ability to rush the passer in this league, which I wish we had with the Jacksonville Jaguars, but with all that speed and athletic ability on defense, that quarterback has to make some things happen himself.
Yeah.
One way or another, whether it's getting on the move, that play that Stroud made that changed the game when he got out of there and
100%.
threw that ball down the field when 3 guys were about to hit him, ball goes over his head, he picks it up and gets out. Those kind of things, and it drives defensive coaches nuts.
Yeah.
So, that's a big factor, and I think Trevor could do that.
He has the ability to do it.
Right.
And once you do that and you become, or that becomes part of your arsenal, oh my gosh, it just takes you to a different level.
Right.
And we've seen it with Allen El Boogie. Let's mention Mahomes, too, has been able to rush in the postseason when he needs to.
Right.
So we'll end it there. We'll get into the run game next week because that's another, I think, a major piece of the puzzle.
Major in my mind.
The play action has got to come back to Jacksonville, that's for sure. All right, we had a great time. All Duval, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Campo and Joe, we will talk to you on XL Primetime.
Yes, sir.
Or we'll talk to you next week.